Hey Sunrise, it's Andrew here with your small group questions for this week as we continue into Genesis 23. Now we're coming right off of the beauty and wonder and glory of chapter 22, the sacrifice of Isaac, the Lord's provision. Then it ends with this declaration of all of the different generations of Abraham's brother, Nahor, which is setting up for us in the future. But it also dives right into what we're talking about today as we come to the death of Sarah. Now, the first question goes, why is the death of Sarah an important narrative for us to have in this text? So having read, hopefully you read all of 23 and then come back to this question of what is significant about this text that it had to be presented in the scriptures for us? What are some of your big picture implications of it? And then from there, we begin to pick apart some of the pieces to really allow the Lord to speak to us as we answer some of these basic thoughts. So, what do we learn about Abraham from his reaction to Sarah's death? It's one of the only times we see this, and it's the first time we see it specifically in Genesis, this idea of mourning. What does that tell us about Abraham and the situation that he is experiencing? Then through this, we begin to see the continuation of then Abraham seeking to bury his wife and establish her in a long-term resting place. And so what is the Lord doing through this story in connection to the covenant? So again, we've seen the covenant being worked through in the life of Abraham. How does this further that narrative and further the truth of God's provision that we just came off of in chapter 22? How do we see that? And then into this, we do have this reality of what is the role of Abraham in fulfilling God's promises? How do we see that in this text? Because ultimately, we're going to see the promise of the land provided conclude this text through God's work in Abraham. And so we hear this interaction of the Hittites with Abraham. What are some of the things that stand out there about how Abraham is treated, how the Hittites respond in that conversation? And then again, of course, how does this all bring us back to the gospel, our realization of Christ as our provider and God as the one who fulfills his promises? How are all of these things seen in this text? So again, it's a pretty straightforward text. Very important text as it begins to, again, bridge us out of the Abraham story and moving us forward into the next patriarch. So the first matriarch has died. We'll then transfer next week into the new matriarch will be introduced in Rebecca. So hopefully you'll spend some time in this text as we move forward in our study in the book of Genesis. Can't wait to see you guys on Sunday as we hear God's word proclaimed.